to the Cross Cultural Couples podcast. My name is Erica El Halali,
And I am Hamada El Hilali.
and I am from an Irish and Danish American background.
And I am from Rabat, Morocco.
Yes, so we get into the weeds of all things cross cultural couples in our podcast. You can also check out our website at crossculturalcouples.com. We do have a blog starting there where we're talking about different issues facing cross cultural couples. And then also be sure to check us out on Instagram at Cross Cultural Couples. So, today's episode, we will be finishing our series on Hofstede's 6 cultural dimensions. One of the main ways you can help your relationship is start learning about not only your partner's culture, but really learn about your own culture and get into the weeds a little bit as far as what are those cultural dimensions that you were raised with, that your partner was raised with, and then how can those be interacting in your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what we're trying to do with these. By exploring these 6 dimensions, we want to give you some insights and some different ways to think about culture and give you a starting point to say, how do I learn about another culture? Is it just the food? Is it just the customs? There's also different values that go into it, and that's really what these cultural dimensions get at. So the one we're going to talk about today is on indulgence. And this is one that we've, as humans, have been facing for pretty much since the beginning of time. And that's really, how do we deal with indulgence? So how do we think about raising our small children? How are they socialized? And then just as we grow into adults, how do we view indulgence? Mm-hmm. So it's really the extent to which people try to control their desires and their impulses. And so what that really means is when you're raised, you may have parents who, or a community that raises you with relatively weak controls. Mm-hmm. That's more of an indulgent society. Or you may have a relatively strong control put in place, and that's a society that has more restraints. So a society will be either more indulgent or more restrained. Depending upon how impulses are viewed. So the first country we're going to talk about, we'll go over all of them first. So we'll talk about Morocco, Ireland, the United States, and Denmark. And the reason we'll talk about those 4 is those are the cultures that we're from, and those are the ones that could be at work in our relationship. So I was born in America, but my mother's side of the family is Irish. My father's side was Danish, and so those cultural values can still be impacted in how I was raised and influenced. So if you are an immigrant, it may be helpful for you to look at the country you're living in and then the country that your family is from. That may give you insight into some behaviors going on with the family.
So, Morocco's low score on this dimension, which is 25, indicates that it has a culture of restraint. Societies with low score in this dimension have a tendency to cynicism and pessimism.
This is a hard word.
Pessimism. Also, in contrast to indulgent societies, restrained societies do not put much emphasis on leisure time and control the gratification of their desires. People with this orientation have the perception that their actions are restrained by social norms and feel that indulgent themselves is somewhat wrong.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. Morocco was the lowest. They're the only restrained society out of the 4 that we're going to be talking about today. It's definitely interesting to think about Moroccans being a little bit more cynical and pessimistic I do kind of feel that. I feel like you guys tend to be not as optimistic as Americans.
No, even like in the music sometimes, like the little kind of sad music does better than the more happier music.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
That's true. Actually, some of my favorite Arabic songs are sad songs. Actually, now that I think about it, I also think it's interesting when you think about raising a child, how children are raised in Morocco versus America or Ireland or Denmark. I definitely think there's a lot more control placed on kids.
Yeah. In Morocco.
Mm-hmm. How would you feel growing up? How you were raised versus how you see kids raised in America?
Well, in Morocco, like my mom would just be strict with us. She was just like, "Hey, come back," or like, she doesn't really say it in a nicer way. Mm-hmm. There's no nicer way for her. Maybe like 80% of the time is not nice. She is nice, but the way she talks to us, some people would think it's not nice, but it's really, that's the way she talks. Like most women.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't mean that they don't love their kids or we love our moms and she loves us so much. Just the way she talks to us is strict. Don't do this, or go, or like come back, like straight phrases like that.
Yeah, I also think too there's probably more discipline in Morocco than in the the other three countries, as far as it seems like people have like more maybe not strict rules, maybe they are strict, but like I almost never saw Moroccans like talking back to their parents.
Yeah, you're not supposed to talk to your elderly people. Yeah, you're not supposed to talk to like your grandma or like your mom, or you should put your mom first before anything else. So like the mom has a really big values in American society, so you don't really, you know that you don't really want to make her mad or make her sad because she's so important.
Yeah. I also think the part about control, the gratification of desires, is really interesting because I think like in America there's very much this instant gratification. Like if you want something you get it instantly, where I think in Morocco there's maybe more of a, if you want this you have to wait, like you're lucky if you get it. You know what I mean? It's more like if you told your mom, "Oh, I want this toy," she's not just gonna run out and get it for you.
No, we have like for I remember I probably had like 3 toys in my whole life.
Yeah.
All we did was just play outside. Go play outside.
Yeah.
Go play outside. So we don't. Oh yeah, you want this too bad. So they don't really buy them. First of all, it's just because of the money wise. We didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
So and secondly, I think it's just the culture is like they're not just gonna give you everything you want.
Yeah, because I think because I've seen too even Moroccans that do have money, like they'll save that money for like education or like tutoring, or like they'll put money towards the kids' longer term future instead of, well, we're just gonna buy him every toy he wants because it's Christmas or whatever, birthday or whatever. So I think that there's definitely that at play as well. That's a big difference between the two and makes one more restrained versus indulgent.
They do buy a lot of stuff, but they don't buy like stuff that is expensive.
Yeah.
Like they're kind of careful. Oh yeah, you want this T-shirt? Okay, but it's $2. So you don't go and buy a T-shirt for $200.
Yeah, like if you went and told your dad, "Oh, I want these $100 sneakers," they'd be like,
"No,
you lost your mind." Like that's not. You wouldn't even think to ask it, let alone like get a. Oh, okay, we'll get it for your birthday, or we'll get it for Christmas, or something.
You'll just say, okay.
Yeah.
That means a no.
I also think it's interesting too that the emphasis on leisure time isn't as strong there. I think that, like in Morocco too, you don't see like a lot of people with hobbies either. Like probably part of it's economic, but I mean, I don't see like here we put kids in so many different activities. Like they have music lessons, they have sports, they have this.
Well, most of that costs money though.
Yeah.
Like for us, we only played soccer and like running because that was the cheapest thing you can play. You can't go to your mom and say, "Oh, I want to play swimming."
Yeah.
Swimming is probably $100 a month. That's what your dad gets paid for the whole month.
Yeah.
You're not gonna spend that on a swimming class.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so it's most of it comes back to like income.
But even like adults, I don't see them having hobbies. Like you'll see adults all the time here have hobbies, even with like kids.
Well,
and
yeah,
stuff.
what kind of hobbies?
Well, like you'll see people they're like do biking or they'll do
There you
podcasting
go.
or they'll do
So
like
for us, like even for me, I liked biking, but I didn't have money to buy a bike.
mm,
So a lot of people do like, oh, I wish I just had a bike. I'll just go use a bike all the time.
yeah.
So I think it goes back to like money wise, but
That's true. But I think like even if you gave a middle-aged Moroccan a bunch of money, they would I don't see them like developing like scrapbooking hobby or like
Yeah.
I don't see them developing
You're right.
that even if you give them money.
even reading, like you have money to buy a book, but we don't really read. Not a lot of people read in Morocco.
Yeah. But
So-
that's not value. Like that's not the value of the society is where you're not the value isn't on leisure activities.
Yeah.
Where I feel like maybe in these other countries that's the goal is the leisure activities almost.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one was interesting. I think it's interesting how different that one is than the other ones we're gonna go through. So the next one we're gonna talk about is Ireland.
With a high score of 65, it is clear that Irish culture is one of indulgence. People in societies classified by a high score in indulgence generally exhibit a willingness to realize their impulses and desires with regard to enjoying life and having fun. They possess a positive attitude and have a tendency towards optimism. In addition, they place a higher degree of importance on leisure time, act as they please, and spend money as they wish.
Yeah, I definitely think that this is true of what I've seen of Irish culture, especially like the tendency towards optimism. And I think there is, I mean, Irish people have such a rich heritage of poetry and writing and reading, and I think like even music and dance. There's a lot of different leisure activities that go back hundreds of years, and Ireland by no means was a wealthy country, 300 years ago, 200 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it hasn't really even gotten to considered more of a wealthier level until the last half of the last century. So
Yeah.
even in a country that was poor, they still valued leisure activity, whether it was dance
Yeah.
or music. You'd have somebody, even drums, things like that. Like you could get cheaper instruments and still have Irish dance. You'd still have song and things like that. So I do think that money alone isn't the only factor at play. I do think part of it is cultural.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I also think it's interesting the part about acting as they please and spending money as they wish. I think that definitely when you look at savings rates in the West, they're a lot lower than in other parts of the world. I think people just don't save as much as other parts of the world. So people, if they have money, they want to spend it, and they do. So and that's, I mean, even in America, that's definitely the case with the role of the consumer in the economy. So
Yeah, I agree.
So the next one we're going to talk about is the United States. They're very close to Ireland. They're at a 68. This is, and they say this in combination with their normative score is reflected by, there's these contradictory attitudes and behavior going on in America. So there's very much this work hard but play hard mentality. So they specifically are, and I think this is so true. We've talked about this in other cultural dimensions for the U.S. particularly. There is kind of a divide in the United States, whether it's however you want to call it, progressive versus conservative, whatever it is, there is this notion that the US will have one value, for example, working hard, which isn't really an indulgent value at all. But then with that, they also believe in playing hard. And you see people, they work so hard. They're, American workers work very long hours, even when you look at it compared to like other Western European countries, things like that. They work longer hours, have less vacation time, they're more productive. And yet there's this notion that they should enjoy life. And so Americans will then go buy bigger houses, bigger, fancier cars, spend more money on nicer vacations, all of it. So I do think that it's like there's this busyness, and then this busyness also in consuming whatever you made while you were working so hard. The pandemic, I think, has changed some of that. I think it forced people to stop and think about things like, why are we so busy? Do we need to have all the meetings that we have? Do we need to have
or go to the office?
Yeah, do we need to be working as hard as we are, and do we need to be buying all of the things that we buy? I mean, I don't think Americans are going to stop becoming consumers overnight or anything. But I do think the pandemic has maybe put a pause on some of that do part of America's psyche.
Yeah, well, a lot of it has changed to online stuff, like ordering stuff online, and
yeah,
so I don't know.
Well, and one thing that Hasid actually pointed out that I thought was so interesting, he said that the United States has waged war against drugs, and yet it's very busy on this war on drugs that we've had. I mean, it's part of our foreign policy, it's part of domestic policy, when you look at criminal reform, all of it. But yet, the drug addiction in the United States is still higher than many other wealthy countries. So, I mean, it's interesting. And he even says that we're a prudish society, and yet some of our most well-known televangelists appear to be immoral. So it's like we have this really contradictory nature in the United States, where I almost feel like the United States is going through a bit of an identity crisis. We're still trying to figure out who we are and what really is our cultural identity. And I still think Americans don't really know, what should they be doing. Where maybe in Ireland there's more of a tradition of, we know we can have poetry and dance and do these things in our spare time, where Americans don't necessarily, if they're not busy doing stuff, what are they supposed to be doing besides consuming things? So it's an interesting dynamic, and I think definitely the capitalist system that we have in the United States drives this consumption. When you look at marketing and everything else, we're programmed from a pretty young age to go out, make as much money as you can, and then go spend it. So
yeah,
it's definitely part of the culture. The next one on the list is Denmark.
Scored 70.
So they were the highest out of the 4 countries that we looked at.
So Denmark has a high score of 70 in this dimension, meaning that Denmark is an indulgent country. People in societies classified by high score in indulgence generally exhibit a willingness to realize their impulses and desires with regard to enjoying life and having fun. They possess a positive attitude and have a tendency toward optimism. In addition, they place a higher degree of importance on leisure time, act as they please, and spend money as they wish.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. It was interesting that it scored so much higher than America. Well, not so much higher, but higher than America, because I do consider America to be pretty indulgent. But I think, like, even when you look at how, if you read any books about Danish parenting styles, it's very much about letting the child naturally go about their day and create their own, whether it's let him just go outside and play and create. Like there's this sense of like not wanting to restrain or over control them. And I think it's really interesting that they do have such a high score on this, especially when you look at parenting styles and just how even the Danish society is kind of structured around if you're really interested in something. So, for example, if you want to become an artist, it's pretty easy to become an artist there because there is a social safety net to support you. So there isn't necessarily some of the practical or like pragmatic concerns that would come up in America. There's also such a an interesting balance when you think about like their work life. They don't work necessarily. They work hard, but they go home at the end of the day. Like they
lunch
yeah, like they have a balance between that work and leisure, which I think is really interesting. And I think that then allows them to have more hobbies, have more rich experiences in life than just work. Where in America, we want to play hard and work hard, but the play hard for us tends to be more of a consumption type of experience where, you know, there's a lot of things you can do in your leisure time that don't cost a lot of money. You can write, you can do writing, you can do a lot of things that don't cost that much. So I do think it's an interesting balance that they have, and it in that way I'm not surprised that they're the highest on our ratings for indulgence.
Yeah.
So I mean, for me, I know when we had Sammy, I thought about how do we want to raise him? Do we want him to have more of a Danish parenting style, more of an American style, more of a Moroccan style? Everything I've read about Danish parenting, I really like. I like the way it fosters creativity and curiosity. I think that that's important, especially when you see the world the way it is and the types of jobs in the future that Sammy's going to have. And that's very an American thing for me to think of. It's like, okay, can he get a job if he has this skill? Because it's like in America, you have to have a job that you can work hard at and contribute and get income in so that you could then support an American lifestyle. So it's interesting. I think I do value though Moroccan society in the terms of some of the instant gratification. It's sometimes good for kids to learn delayed gratification. So even if it's like, okay, he's got to save up his money if he wants to buy something.
Yeah.
Like that's a good value to teach. I think a lot of times I've seen a lot of people who I grew up with or even sometimes myself where it's like if I wanted something, I just went and got it. And I don't necessarily think that taught me the best values.
But a lot of Americans do that though. I hear a lot of my friends just say, oh, if you want this, he's going to save up and buy it.
I think more people are doing it now. I think after the financial collapse in 2009, I think a lot of that changed. Just financially, people weren't living as large as they were in the 90s. But for anybody who grew up in the 90s, I think in America, if you wanted something, you could pretty much get it if you were a kid. Yeah. I mean, I saw people's parents give them everything. Wow. Like things they didn't even think they would want, they would get. And so I do think it raised a very indulgent society in terms of not having that experience with delayed gratification. So I think that has hurt a lot of people in our age.
Are you saying the 90s because the economy was good or what?
Yeah, the economy was booming. Clinton was president and things were... I mean, I remember my first job that I had at a bank. It was, I got hired right after the financial collapse at a bank. So they were like, oh yeah, you're, our top performer, blah, blah, blah. But we're only going to give you it was like a ridiculous raise. I don't even remember the amount. It was like 20-cent raise or something. And they were saying, she's like, oh, well, the economy's bad right now. But I remember when I was working in the 90s and would get like these crazy pay increases and raises. So I think it'll be interesting after the pandemic if the economy takes off and we see another time period like that.
I think it will take off.
I think it will too. I think it will too. But it'll be interesting if we go through another time of economic expansion, if we do see people start to indulge their children more and give them more things. So it'll be really interesting, especially as we raise Sammy during a time period like that. Are we going to say, oh, let's raise them like the 90s kids? Or are we going to say, no, we remember what it was like to live through the recession? Are we going to teach him that delayed gratification?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the situation. I mean, if he wants, I don't know, if he wants like a little toy, maybe we can get it for him. But if he wants like a big purchase, then maybe I'll save up like a big bike, or I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm good at like parenting at this point. I'm just learning I'm just trying to get to the balance of it and just do what makes sense at that time.
Yeah. Well, it's good to start thinking about it though and seeing like what kind of values.
Even sometimes you think of what you want to do and your kids will go crazy and like.
Yeah, there's always that in the moment, but I think it's good to be a little bit conscious as far as like what is the culture of value I'm conveying here? Is this what I want to pass down? And you may find stuff in both cultures that you like. So maybe you like the Danish style that allows for more unstructured play.
Yeah.
And so you say, well, that's something I want to have for my son so that he can grow his creativity. But this delayed gratification, I think, is an important value for him to learn. So we're going to teach him how to, have a piggy bank or whatever, and
well, it depends on the kids. Stuff. I mean, even like they're the same like family.
It's true.
Some kids like to like learn and do his thing and go and discover things, and some other kids they just like to sit home and like read a book. So I guess it depends on the child and on the time and just get feel of it, I guess.
Yeah.
And see what your kids like. I mean, you can't take your kids by force and tell them go explore. They're like, no, I want to sit home and read a book. That's you just can't do that.
Yeah.
You gotta listen to the kids and see what really he wants, I think.
But even if you figure out what he really wants, do you give it to him right away or do you make him wait for
Again,
it? Like,
it depends.
That's the cultural component here, where it's like, every kid is going to be different. I want different things, but how do you provide that to your child, and when do you provide it?
Yeah, that's for me. I think it's depend on the situation.
Yeah, well, everything.
Or if he wants like a popsicle when we're going outside for a wedding, he's wearing a white suit, maybe not. But then, if he wants like, I guess that's what it is, don't you think?
Yeah, probably not a good idea.
Not a good idea. If he wants to go sleep at 7 a.m., go ahead. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's my first kid, so I'm still learning.
Yeah, it is interesting though, because like Morocco is funny to me because they are really strict about things, but then like other things they're not. So like bedtimes are not enforced in Morocco.
They'll go out like midnight. It's okay.
Yeah, and it's like but then they're really strict about other things. So it is interesting how even in different cultures, even in an indulgent culture, may be more strict about some things than others. So
yeah.
Like even like playing outside, like in Morocco, it's totally normal to play outside as a kid. Where here, it's like no, that'd probably be a safety issue. You can't just let your kid play outside and run around, Yeah. One part of it's just like Moroccan streets are a lot narrower, so especially if you're in like the old Medina of Morocco, of any Moroccan city, you're not going to have cars and things like that to worry about.
Yeah, donkeys go around.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't worry about donkeys.
Yeah, so I mean everything is different, but anyway, we hope you enjoyed this last and final episode on Hofstede. If you want to learn about the other cultural dimensions, you can look at our last 5 episodes. Episode 5 was on power distance. Episode 6 was on individualism versus collectivism. Episode 7 was on masculinity versus femininity. And episode 8 was on uncertainty avoidance. Episode 9 is on long-term orientation. And then this episode is on indulgence.
Cool.
So you can find all of those episodes on Apple, Spotify. You can also find them on our website, crossculturalcouples.com. So feel free to connect with us on Instagram or on our website directly as well. And we look forward to continuing the podcast. Let us know if you have any feedback for us or have questions or want us to talk about a specific issue. We would love to hear from you. So please reach out to us and please review our podcast on Apple if you have a chance.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll meet with you again next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.